Hey guys, I'm so sorry, no devlog today, but I wanted to take some time to show you the amount of work that actually goes into making a Project Feline devlog. We'll use the last one I published as an example. That was my 40th devlog called Designing Characters with Soul, and that was one of my favorite ones. It might be my favorite one I've ever made, because it talks about character design, which I really love. So usually, I have all these thoughts in my head about characters, but to get them out of my head and into your head, it requires a bit of work. So it usually starts with something like a script, and this one was a very brief script. This was really more like a Spark Notes than a script. Sometimes I will need scripts that are more in-depth. This is the script for my upcoming one that I'm working on, and you can see this one is quite long and it's very verbose, and every word in this one has been carefully chosen to figure out how to trim it down, because that's really the key challenge. There's this old saying where it's like, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, and that brevity is the soul of wit. So I try to take that attitude with my devlogs, because game development is so technical and so complicated. So each one of these paragraphs has been tightly engineered to communicate what I want to say in the fewest words I can. And then, this does take a lot of work to shorten things down. But it means when I go to record later, the video itself is a bit shorter and I'm wasting less of the viewer's time. So we've got examples like this, where this was like a version of the script for episode 36, I think. And then about the next day, I thought, oh, I can kind of cut some of this. And then I was able to condense it out even further to that. But that is very intensive, and I don't always have the luxury of time to hyper edit a script to this standard. I only kind of pull this out for the really important ones, but for things a bit more casual, it's just a checklist of show them this, talk about this. There is a sort of a diverging styles I've noticed with devlogs, where some people are very casual about it and will just want to, this week I did so and so and so and so, and I used to do a little bit of that in the beginning, but I found that as I got deeper into the project past prototyping, there wasn't really enough going on week to week to justify a video, especially past the honeymoon phase of the project, where you're infatuated with the idea and stuff. When you get into the actual technicals and the work, it's just work. For enough stuff to happen to warrant a good story, because that's what they are, really. These devlogs to me they're not just progress updates, they're stories. Every good story, it always starts with a script and a plan of what I want to say. I like being able to, in retrospect, make a video on it, because it's sort of my way of dealing with things in development that happen. For me, for my own sanity, it's sort of better if I do fight the battles in the game, and then once I've resolved something and I've gotten past something, then I feel in a much better position to make a video on it, because not only have I dealt with it, and I can confidently talk about it, but by making the video, it kind of creates closure. And I don't need that closure while I'm in the middle of battle. So then once I have a script I'm happy with and comfortable with, it's time to then record it. So I open up Adobe Audition, which is my audio, and I create a new audio file, I give it a name, and then I just start recording. So hey guys, welcome back to another devlog, and this episode does not exist because I'm just using this as an example. And this process can be a little finicky as well. Usually when I record something for the first time, it sounds kind of bad. I can go back and listen to this. Start recording. So hey guys, welcome back to another devlog. And I can decide, maybe I don't like the way that this was read, and then I can go ahead here and then start recording over the top of it with maybe a different cadence, a bit of different energy. Maybe I'm talking too quiet. I got to keep an eye on all of that stuff. So then once that is recorded, we can finally then open the editing. So if we open up Premiere here, I've just got the production window. It's completely empty right now. We'll go through the file system in just a minute, but we're going to scroll down and find in my folder here of devlogs. These are all the devlogs going back to episode 1. And this is the latest one I uploaded. Now, this is a bit of a misnomer here, right? Because what ended up being devlog 40 was actually the 41st episode I started working on. And devlog 40, which I started working on months ago, is going to be devlog 41 when it's finished. So I got to reorder these names at some point, but I just haven't had time to yet. But we'll open up devlog 41, which was the last one I uploaded, and we'll open up the sequence folder, And here is the actual timeline. Here's the actual episode, and we can just play it right now.
Hello, Raymond here, back with another Project Feline Devlog. For the last little
And,
while, I've
you know, it
had
just
my hands
plays
full
like a
with
video.
polishing Gabby's
And you
movement,
probably see there's quite
revamping
a lot
the
going
combat,
on in this
improving the art
timeline.
direction, and
So let's have a look at
engineering.
that, shall we? So we'll zoom into this timeline a bit. There's a lot of layers going on. Below this line here, we've got all the audio, and then above the line, we've got all the video. So I have to do some of these like little effects here. So this is just the game's logo with a bit of animation on it and a few layers. So I've got this background layer, which is just a color overlay. And this is just to help make the text a bit more readable. Just got a bit of a blue solid overlay with some opacity. Then we've got the actual logo itself, which has some animation. But if I turn this off, the animation is kind of important because without it, it looks a bit lifeless and boring because when you start the video, this will be the first frame you see. And if there's no animation, it just kind of looks a bit stiff. But if I turn this on, I've got a bit of, you can see I've got some animated keyframes here. I've got some scale going from 200 to 100%, and then it sort of just fades down like that. And then it's got some motion blur as well, just to kind of add that extra bit of finesse to it. So without the motion blur, it just looks a bit like it's in an editing program. But if I turn on the motion blur like that, it looks like the text is actually there, kind of. And it's very subtle. It only lasts a few frames, but, it adds an extra bit of finesse. So yeah, you can see there's that difference with the blur. And then I've got the actual footage of the game. And this is, I usually, having to record this, I usually just like open up Unreal and film myself recording the game. And you'll notice even here, there's some other layers happening too. It isn't just the gameplay, but we've got this yellow layer on top. And this is actually a little text disclaimer that says gameplay footage not final, subject to change. Now this might seem a bit unnecessary. I find it's usually helpful to remind people that there are, this is not finished and that they're watching a work in progress thing. And yeah, so I've got that in a few of these clips. And then, later I might get clips from other games. And, I like to make sure I appropriately attribute where things come from, because, I think that's just the respectful thing to do. So if I just extend this timeline a bit so we can see it. So yeah, we've got this bit of text here, and I've got, the way I tend to format it is, I've got it in my nice font here, Euro style, very good font, and I'll usually in italics put the title of the game or the video that I'm showing, and then I'll do one of these symbols, and then I'll have the author of that work. To actually like get footage to then show while I'm talking about things, that can be kind of a bit of a quest. This is usually my least favorite part of making these videos, is editing B-roll while I'm talking, because not only is B-roll expensive to record, because especially time-lapse shots like these, where I'm recording for like an hour at a time, and I have to like speed it up. Organizing all this footage has been a bit of a trial as well. So earlier this year, I actually went on a massive quest to reorganize all this footage. I'll show you what it used to be like. It used to be complete hell. If we open up one of these, this is sort of what the inside of a devlog folder used to look like. So we've got the actual video itself, a little preview version, and then the source folder, which would then have more stuff in it. It would have the Premiere Pro project file. It'll have like the little text file for the description that I would copy paste into YouTube. And then I'd have the thumbnails in this folder of just the Photoshop file and the final thing. And then the footage folder where I would collect footage of things, of my voiceover, screenshots. I didn't know how bad this is going to be until later, because it gets to the point later where, let's say I want to reuse one of these clips in a devlog later on. Well, the way I would used to do it is, let's say it's devlog 30 something, and I want to use this bit of footage. And this was from devlog 3. And this is just like me with Unreal doing stuff. Let's say I want to reuse this. I used to copy this clip and then go to the current devlog I was working on, like this one, source footage, and then paste that clip in the devlog 38 folder, like that. And then in Premiere, I'd have to go and find, and I've just tried to open this backup, and you can see that it's like missing a lot of this clips. And this is the kind of thing that can happen if you don't organize your footage that well. And I learned this the hard way, because you can see here that this is devlog 38, and there's a bunch of clips here it's referencing from devlog 37. And because this is just on a backup drive, so it's probably not going to be able to find that. It's looking in the wrong file path probably, but you can see that it's getting real confused. It's like losing where some of the stuff is. This is how it used to look. I used to have footage my adjustment layer, my sequences, logos, and I have to import these for each episode. I have to make all these folders and import all of these logos per episode. Oh, it was so bad. And then I have to import all the music per episode of like what music I want to use and the sound effects I want to use. And it's just like, if you do that for one video, it's okay. But when you've got like 40 videos all sharing the same assets, more or less, it makes it not fun. If I wanted to reuse that clip from Devlog 3, so I'd have to copy it to this footage folder in its own footage folder in Devlog 38, because each episode would have its own footage folder. So I'd have to then drag that and import that into the footage in Premiere, like this, and then I'd be able to then drag it in to the timeline. It just creates all this duplicate footage, because now this clip exists twice on my hard drive, even though it's the same clip. And if I rename that to something else later, that can like mess with things as well, and it just gets very cumbersome, and it makes it really hard to hunt for and find footage, especially footage from previous episodes, which I do a lot because I have so much footage. You know, it's actually kind of beneficial to be able to reuse old footage than to record new footage each time. And it was just so bad. But now, if we open my new devlog folder, the current one, you can see that there's a lot less folders. It looks a lot more organized. So what's going on? So in this folder system, I've got production, which just has the basic categories of, it's like kind of the meta bins mainly. So the footage bin, the graphics bin, the audio bin, like they're all stored here. This folder is project. This is anything project file related goes in here. So for instance, if I need like a certain background or an illustration or something, or if I have like merch, I'll have that as the project files, the Photoshop files will all go in project. This is also where the thumbnails project files go. So I've got all my project files, Photoshop files for the thumbnails, each thumbnail. Then there's footage. This is where anything time-based goes. So any videos, gameplay, me doing like face cam stuff, anything like that. All of this is in the footage folder. For anything not time-based, that's 2D, that goes in the graphics folder. That looks something like this. So if I open up my, let's go Feline, I've just got like a bunch of screenshots or stills or, you know, anything that's just an image that goes in the graphics folder in its own area. So I've got like renders of characters, I've got screenshots of the game. Then the audio folder is anything just audio. So I've got all my music, any music I use in the videos. I sort it by artist and then by album. And then for voiceover, that goes in the voiceover folder. And these are all just timestamped. These names are just timestamped as to when I recorded whatever it was I recorded them. So any Adobe Audition recording, voice recording, it just goes in the voiceover folder. And then any other sound effects I use, that goes in the sound effects folder. So any like swish sound effects or the vine boom sound effect. Then I've got my exports folder. So this is where everything that goes out, it all goes through here first. I've also got a previews folder inside exports, which has a bunch of little clips that I record some of these I've posted to Twitter and stuff, and some of them I haven't posted yet. But any little snippets of like cool things I want to show off, they go in preview. And then I've got the last folder here, which is documents, scripts, outlines, things like that. So if I open up this folder, you see I've got a bunch of text files with all the different scripts. So here is the actual just outline for the last devlog I uploaded. So it's all just stored as just text files. So now I'm using this different thing in Premiere, which is a great feature called Productions. It's like a system that lets you manage and share assets between multiple Premiere projects, which is incredible. So you can see these are the project files themselves. And if I open up footage, this is the biggest one. But it means that all of the footage I've ever used is just in one place, and I don't need to duplicate it. So if I open that up, you can see here is a bunch of footage. So let's say for that devlog, well, let's go back. The devlog 41. Let's say here I deleted that B-roll for the intro. Let's say I deleted all that, and now I've got my voiceover, but I don't have any B-roll to put for this segment. Well, where would I go find that? Well, now I know exactly where I would go. I'd go to my footage project. I'd open that up, open up the game version of Feline, which is 0.14 at the moment. then I'll find a clip of footage I want to use. So let's if we double click these, we can preview the, yeah, here we go. This looks like some gameplay I'd like to use. So I'll just click and drag this in, and this is gonna be a bit long, so I'll try and drag this somewhere where it isn't gonna overwrite anything. Make a cut, and then we'll take this little bit and we'll put it in the B-roll gap there. So now, what I'm talking,
with polishing Gabby's movement,
there's our
revamping
gameplay
the
footage.
combat, improving the art direction, and engineering various systems and tools to develop content for the game.
And yeah, it's just a matter of going in and finding. I've got like a bunch of little bits of footage here as well. If we open up this whole folder, point 14, and look at it in tile view, this is all the footage I have of the current game version, and it's just loading in all the thumbnails. So I've got a bunch of recordings of, you know, like little me doing stuff in the game. Here's some footage of the drone that I recorded. And this was for my video on designing this character. So I went in the engine and recorded a bunch of footage of just me moving the camera around the drone very cinematically like this. And usually before, you know, after I've recorded the voiceover, I'll usually I'll put it into the timeline and then make a bunch of like markers. I'll add a bunch of markers to the timeline saying, you know, B-roll, feline, gameplay footage, and I'll put that little marker there to remind me later to then go back through and like add footage of feline for that bit. I try to make sure I don't use too many folders, so I don't try to do a lot of nested folders, where before, you know, each episode would have its own source folder, its own footage folder, its own audio folder. Now there is only one footage folder, one audio folder, but inside those, I try to group them together by topic if possible with footage. So for instance, with this footage, I've got things grouped in, you know, point 14, which is all the footage related to this version of Project Feline. I'll group that in its own folder. Or, you know, if I've got a certain asset I worked on, like the drone, I'll have its own folder of renders and footage of that character. But, you know, sometimes I can't always group it by topic. You know, sometimes I'm just recording stuff happening on the screen, in which case I just put it in this folder. And it's just usually things like gameplay, B-roll, or A-roll of like me talking about something. And it's really taken its time. But if I were to open one of these up, let's go and open one of these, see what's in it. So yeah, there's me. And I'm just sort of talking about something. So this is going to be used in a devlog later. And you might notice as well that a lot of these are named certain things. The naming convention is also very key. So in my old footage folder, I didn't really have a clear naming convention, and it made everything really hard. So if I open this up, Feline Gameplay, where it's just called Feline 0.7 Gameplay, well, what if tomorrow I wanted to go and record new footage of this version of Feline 0.07? I can't then also call it Feline 07 Gameplay. It just gets so disorganized. So I found that a better system is just to change the naming convention completely, and I'll show you sort of how that's looking now. So if I open up my current footage bin of Feline Gameplay, you can see that all of this is following a consistent naming convention now. And you can see here at the very top, I've got Feline 0.10. It's still got the file version and the game version in the file name, but it has this prefix with a bunch of these numbers. And this is the date and time it was recorded at. And I've actually added these as prefixes to every piece of footage I use, and I find that it's a way better way of organizing things. So I've got Gabby's new model. I've got all this in a folder called Gabby Model 03, because this is her third model. Even here, I usually just name stuff. I usually use the suffix Gabby Model 3 so that I know that this is the focus of all of these clips is going to be on her model. But most of these, they're all prefixes with this file name. So even here, like, I've got a render of her walk right here. I've actually got two of them. I think these are different stages of her walk cycle. So I've got like her old walk and the work in progress version. So if I open up this, you can see I've got two walks. I've got the new one and I've got the old one. And the actual prefix, the actual suffix for these is the same. It's just, if I hadn't done this naming convention, I would have called them both Gabby Model 3 Walk, Gabby Model 3 Walk, but that would have had a conflict, obviously. But by just leaving in this prefix of the date and time, I can differentiate these quite easily so that I know which one is different. And then I can just leave them, you know, I don't have to then waste time trying to figure out, oh, what should I've already used Gabby Model 3 Walk. Oh, I need to pick a new name. That doesn't happen anymore. I don't have that problem anymore. And that was a big stressor. The decision fatigue, especially when you have this much footage. I mean, I don't know if it's like, how many clips do we have in here? This is like what? Even in this, just in this one folder, there's 125 clips in this one folder. So there is a lot. This particular Devlog 41, this was a really fun episode to do. For example, I've got a lot of B-roll and stream clips of me drawing. And then I've got a lot of clips as well of my old childhood drawings as well, and things like that. So that, I would just go and I actually went and opened up one of my old sketchbooks and just with my phone took photos of these. Like if I right click on this one and go reveal in project, it'll open up my graphics. And the graphic here is literally, this is just a photo I took with my phone. And I do a little bit of touching up to it in the timeline just to make it pop. So I've got a drop shadow on it, I've got a blurred background as well, and then I've got a bit of color vignetting on it as well, just to kind of soften it on the eyes, because I know that like for content with light colors like white, a lot of dark mode users out there like me, and I hate when I get flashbanged in a video with a big white background, so I put a bit of a soft vignette on anything that's like too bright, just to kind of soften the effect a little bit. So you can see here I've done the same for all of Gabby's sketches. I've got a bunch of these, and I just do a little crossfade here. For these I'm just crossfading in between these. For some little bits of footage I'll do a more hardcore type transition like this one, where I have like a wipe transition. And this is a custom one I've made. I've got like a solid object here, I've got a sound effect on it, and then I've just got this offset and Gaussian blur. So if I don't have anything on, it just makes a solid cut. But I find that sometimes it's just a bit sudden and it kind of catches me off guard. So I like to do a bit of a wipe transition. So I'll have this animated offset effect, which just shifts the entire, because it's applied to a solid, it applies this to whatever is underneath. So if I move this underneath, the transition won't play at all. But if I move this above, it'll just add this effect to whatever's underneath. And in this case, it's these two clips. You can see here that it starts to offset it so that it's about halfway across the screen, and then halfway in it switches to the, you can actually see it tiling and mirroring here to the next bit. And it looks, even then, it still looks a little bit, I've tried to like smooth the keyframes out a lot and added a lot of easing to make it look smooth, but even then it's still a bit sharp. So I add an extra bit of Gaussian blur, which I literally just have some blurriness and just set it to horizontal, and that adds this sort of motion blur effect, which sort of fades in and out like that, just to kind of make it look easier on the eyes. So I use those from time to time just to transition between, footage and B-roll and that sort of thing. And then sometimes I'll use just a cross dissolve. But then, as you guys know, at the end of my videos, I always have my credits roll and I try to show off some fan art at the end. And that's my favorite bit to do. It'll do a fade, and then it will start doing the Patreon credits and it'll show some fan art on screen. And I've got a credits object here. This is just a scrolling text effect. I think you can make scrolling text in Premiere pretty easily, and I just paste the list of names from my Patreon and YouTube members to put in here. And I give them a nice cool font as well. I don't just put them in Arial. None of this default Arial. No, I pick a cool font. I pick Eurostyle Bold, my favorite font. And then to have something to show on screen, I like to shout out the community and do fan art. I'll say I didn't expect I'd ever have a segment like this. But, to me, when I do this, it's sort of a reminder that to keep going so that I can keep creating segments like this for the videos. I feel so privileged and lucky to have a whole list that I get to put here, and amazing background art to put in as well. So this particular piece is by Rock Lobster, and the fan art, when I just click and drag it, is going to be, depending, because people submit all sorts of stuff, so I usually have to do a bit of work to crop and fit it to the frame. And sometimes it doesn't always fit, right? Like this original piece doesn't quite fit up the video frame. It's different. It's got different dimensions. So what I'll usually do is I'll just fit it up the width, and then I'll add a bit of animation to it here, where I will scroll through the artwork so that you can really see all of it. And I'll also make sure to like put their name in the corner too. So I've got a bit of text at the top here, just a text layer where I've got the username or the display name of whoever authored the work. And then I just sort of have that playing. And yeah, that's like my favorite part of the videos to do that, honestly. And then with audio and things like that, there's a bit of magic there as well, because I find that, this is like some rule in film, I think, where audio is like 70% of the experience. So that's something I pay attention to as well. So I open my mixer here and you can see that I've got some tracks. So I try to keep everything on a different track and mix it, you know, a certain way. Now, I'm not a professional mixer. I don't know all the terminology or anything. I just gotta do what sounds good. And one thing I really don't like about a lot of, especially like kind of amateur YouTube videos, is that a lot of people mix their stuff way too quiet. And I really hate having to play a video and then have to crank the volume all the way up and like still barely hear it. It's a good thing to record things quiet. So actually my own audio right now through this microphone, I've set the levels quite low so that it doesn't peak when I yell or speak into it or whatever. Like it's gonna be in a pretty safe spot. But of course, it's gonna be very quiet for the actual video. So I do a bit of processing on the voice and the music, and I do a bit of mixing and balancing to make sure that the levels are like good, that they're audible, and that they really take up the full range of what's possible. So I have this auto gate on that's set at a certain value that basically cuts out any background hum or noise. And then I have a de-esser as well, which just does a bit of extra to just cut out some of the higher frequencies. And that's higher frequency is usually the kind of spittle mouth sounds. It's usually kind of in this range. And then I have the multiband compressor. Now, I don't know much about compressors, but I know that when I use it with this setting, it sounds good. So this is what I do. And this is it basically helps keep my voice volume at a consistent level. You know, sometimes I'll be recording close or far away from the microphone, just out of, you know, just naturally, right? But if you hear that when you're listening to my video, and if you hear that my voice is like moving around everywhere, it's going to bother you. And I don't want to bother people in the mix. It sort of helps it stand out and not get drowned by B-roll audio or music is using. And I use the broadcast filter because I guess that's what podcasters use. And I like the way podcaster audio sounds. It sounds very crisp. So without,
I've always wanted to pass on to other
and then with,
wanted to pass on to other people.
And it helps it just stand out more. Because then I've got the backing stuff, the music. If I turn off all the effects, the background music will be quite loud. And it'll be almost like if I have that all the tracks on and not filter the background audio at all.
Something I've always wanted to pass on to other people.
You can see how it's just fighting so much. Like, it's so distracting, right? So for the background audio, I first put an amplify on it to take 12 decibels off. I just reduce it by 12 decibels to make it quieter. But, you know, sometimes when I do that with certain background music, it makes the music way too quiet, especially if the music has a lot of dynamic range. So I use Dynamics Processor to even the volume out past a certain threshold. And then that's kind of it for the music. And then at the end, I just have this hard limiter I put on all the audio just to make sure it doesn't peak. And, you know, you might not think about this sort of thing when making a video, right? But I don't know, have you ever watched like a video on YouTube where the person has a really good camera but a bad microphone? I've seen a few like that where they've got the really high quality XLR camera or whatever, you know, the DSLR camera, and then the audio sounds echoey and like it's from an iPod Touch. Like, you know, the audio is terrible. Like, it's really, really noticeable. However, if you have like really bad footage, like you're filming with an iToy Play camera from the PS2, but you have really good audio, it's actually watchable and you won't really notice it. So audio, it's pretty serious business audio. It's like 70% of the viewing experience is audio. So once it's all finished and I've got all the B-roll assembled, I've got the music, I've got the end credits, you know, I've got the voiceover, everything, I've cut it up the way I want. Then I have to go and export it. So I have to click on this export little menu. I usually just export it on like the highest quality. So I usually pick like 1080p HD, render at maximum depth, max quality, because YouTube is going to compress the hell out of this anyway. So I just try to go max quality everything. I give it I call it Feline Devlog 041. I then put it in, it's already picked my exports folder. I've got a specific folder for exports, and then I hit export. I'll show you the export folder. So this video will end up right here.
Hello, Raymond.
So there's the actual final video.
Feline Devlog. For the last
in all its 1080p glory,
with polishing at the
and I could scrub through it. It's all rendered out. It's got all my footage. It's got everything, and that's what I take to YouTube. But that's not the end, because I need to. Just having the video is not enough. We got to have the thumbnail too. We'll open up the project folder, thumbnails, devlog. So if you go to devlog 38, this one took a while to get right as well, because like having to handcraft all this and draw it, it does take a lot of time. So this took maybe 2 or 3 days to render out and get it all right. So I have this sort of, this one's a bit cool. I've got like this very sort of dramatic background, and then I have a render of Gabby and then some text. I don't have much text on this one besides the logo. But you'll notice that I've got 2 different versions of her doing this punch. And that's because for this thumbnail, I did something really cool to speed it up. I actually used her work in progress new model as a starting point. This is a screenshot of her new model, and I've just added some motion blur to the background. And then I added my own lighting on the top because I hadn't finished doing the normals yet. So I added a bunch of adjustment layers to draw. I hand drew the shadows and lighting in on top of the model screenshot. And then I added some color grading, and it still looked a little, and I added some glow, and it still looked a bit weird. So I tried it again, and this one is a bit different, where I've actually drawn over the head, but I've mostly kept the body the same. And that's partly why I've been working so hard on this model, is because once it's finished up, I'd be able to just use the model without having to touch it up too much. And it saves so much time, because before I'd have to hand draw Gabby at each thumbnail, which would take a while. With the adjustments back on, there we have the finished thumbnail. And then once I've got the thumbnail and everything, I then have to go to YouTube and upload it. And because I'm in Australia, the upload speed's pretty slow, so that takes a few hours. Then I set it out to the world and see what happens. And sometimes it does all right, sometimes it doesn't. And then I get back to work on the game and start working on the next video. And that's sort of the beginning to end process of how a devlog, a Project Feline devlog, gets made. After seeing all this, it might make a bit of sense why I can't just pump these out every week. So I know that this is not a devlog, but this is more of a devlog on the devlog. So I hope that that's good enough. And I want to just thank you so much to the patrons and channel members that make these possible, that fund my channel so that I can make these things. You know, some people like to argue that devlogs are a waste of time and a distraction from development, but without my devlogs, I would have given up because it's just so hard to make a game. So I want to give a huge thank you to anyone that has like funded these and helped make these possible. And if you would like to get more in on this, if you'd like to help support my devlogs and my videos, consider becoming a patron, supporting the channel, and you'll get access to all the latest feed. And for everyone else, I just really appreciate you watching them anyway. It really means a lot. So anyway, I'm going to get back to it. That's sort of what goes into a Project Feline devlog, and I hope you found that interesting.